What's up, Duval? It's your favorite former Jag, Bucky Brooks, and this is Bleav in Jaguars, a podcast dedicated to all things Jacksonville Jaguars. I apologize for being off the grid for a little bit. Been kind of moving and shaking with some other responsibilities over at NFL Network, but I'm back to deliver a pod as we go into the weekend. Today, what I want to do is talk about the defense because we've had enough evidence to see the defense, and I would say that the defense looks much better. Really optimistic about how this unit will play this season. But before we talk about Ryan Nielsen and company, let's send a shout out to our sponsor. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit of up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. And speaking of games, the games are about to start. We're about a week away for the Jaguars kicking off in the preseason. This week was a great week of practices. They put on the pads. Doug Peterson was excited because he was talking about the pads really going on and them getting down to business. As we've talked about on the podcast before, Doug Peterson wanted to run a tougher training camp to make sure that the team got off to a faster start. So a little more urgency, a little more detail, maybe a little more physicality to get everybody on offense, defense, and special teams ready to play and really ready to hit the ground running in week one down in Miami. But I'm going to say this. There's been a lot of conversation about Trevor Lawrence and the offense, and we've talked about the offense a ton. But this defense to me is really the X factor in terms of how much the Jaguars accomplished this year. In the past, the last 2 years under Mike Caldwell, this defense has done a really good job of producing turnovers, but it was kind of littered with some mistakes and some miscues that led to big plays from the opposition. Out goes Caldwell at the end of the season, even though some would suggest that the defense played better than the offense last year. In comes Ryan Nielsen, defense coordinator, coming off a hot turnaround in Atlanta with the Falcons, where he had them playing really, really good football. And when we initially heard Ryan Nielsen talk at the initial presser, he talked about kind of building a see ball, get ball defense, one that flies to the ball, one that runs to the ball like crazy. They attack the ball, they knock the ball away, they create turnovers because that's the biggest deciding factor in football. All of those things. And look, being around the league for as long as I've been around it, like you always hear defensive coaches talk about those kinds of things, right? But you always want to see if the actions meet the words when it comes down to coaches, their style of play, and what you see first on the practice field and then what you see in games. We haven't got to the games yet, but I can tell you based on being in Jacksonville for 4 practices last week and then just kind of staying in tune to what's going on this week, man, I'm really excited about the defense because everything that Ryan Nielsen said that he wanted to do on defense, the Jaguars are doing. And they're not only doing it, I see them working at it, which is why the results are beginning to come in live action when they kind of go 11 on 11, or even some of these other simulated drills where they're playing best against best. What have I seen on the practice field? So what I see on the practice field when I watch Ryan Nielsen and the staff get after it is I see a team that's really, really committed to the fundamentals. A lot of the conversation after the team ended the way that they ended down the stretch was, hey, we got to fix the defense. We got to fix the offense. We got to pay more attention to detail to ensure that we finish the season the way that we want to finish, that we close out games the way that we're expected to close out games. All of those little things. We've heard it from the players as they've talked about, look, discipline and attention to detail and being on their P's and Q's and making sure the communication and all those things are right. As an observer, you can see those things because you can see it work in practice. I can tell you it's constant chatter and communication on the defensive side of the ball. Guys are confirming calls with hand signals and talking, and everyone is at it. And it's not just the players. The coaches are very active and into it. When I see the DB coaches, both of them running around in between plays, making sure guys are getting lined up, all that, the energy is contagious. And when you have those kinds of coaches that are super energetic and going after it, your players can't help but kind of take the cue from the coaches and follow their lead. The other thing that I'm seeing, because I talked about the energy and the communication being there, the fundamentals and the detail. So if you're a team that wants to be really good at taking the ball away, every day you have to be committed to making sure you practice taking the ball away. So as the teams break up and you look down in the far corners of the field, you see a little mini turnover circuit where you have guys scooping and scoring. So they're simulating picking up fumbles that are bouncing on the ground, and they have a clear pathway to pick it up and maybe return it for a touchdown. You're seeing guys fall on the ball where it's crowded, there's traffic. So hey, I can't pick it up, so let me fall on it. You're seeing interception drills where guys are catching balls. Defensive backs are not only catching balls in practice, but they're spending time catching them off the jugs. Everything that they're doing, including punching the ball out. They talk about the peanut punch, a maneuver that is named after Charles Peanut Tillman, where he would just attack oncoming ball carriers and find a way to forcefully punch the ball out with a powerful right hand or left hand punch. These guys are doing it, and it's becoming a habit because you see it also carry over to when they're in team drills. They're doing those same things, attacking the ball, scooping and scoring, picking it up. They're taking the ball away. We heard so much about Trevor turning the ball over in the red zone. Well, rather than kind of blame Trevor, maybe we should credit the defense for really being on the job in terms of taking the ball away. All those things are intentional. They're not, I would say, happenstance or fluky. They're really working at taking the ball away. So now let's talk about style of play and what they've talked about wanting to be. So everyone kind of expected, even though they didn't really let the cat out the bag, everyone has expected the Jaguars to be more of a man-to-man team. When you look at what the Atlanta Falcons did under Ryan Nielsen, they were man-to-man over 60% of their snaps. By playing man-to-man, what you're doing in today's game, you're taking away the layups and the gimmies that a lot of defenses are willing to concede by playing off coverage or playing zone, meaning the bubble screens to the perimeter, the quick routes, the RPO game. It's harder to really get snug and tight on those things if you're not playing man-to-man. The Jaguars are playing more man-to-man, or they've shown more man-to-man than we've expected, just because it really fits their personnel. When you look at the personnel that they have in place, these long corners that Trent Baalke has gone out and really made a concerted effort to get these long corners, guys that are right at 6 feet with long arms that are very, very comfortable being nose to nose. And so it is part of a intentional strategy by the front office and coaches to make sure they're on the same page, that the players that are in the building match the scheme that is going to be played. And when you look at the secondary, it's definitely a match. And it's going to be important as I talk about the young players that they're really building this defense around. It all matches because the defense fits the strengths of those individual players. And a lot of times you hear coaches talk about how important it is for that to happen, how important it is for us to build a scheme that really accentuates what the guys do really well. It's happening in real time down in Jacksonville. So the scheme, a 4-2-5 scheme. There are a lot of people that are worried about 4-man front, 3-man front. Is it a 4-3 or 3-4? In actuality, this is a 4-2-5 defense. NFL defenses spend about 70 to 75% of their time in sub packages, nickel defense, 5 or more defenders. So the Jaguars are just going to be able to line up in a 4-2-5 defense and be able to get after it. The benefits of a 4-2-5 defense for this personnel is it takes Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker from being stand-up edge players on early down, and it puts them with their hand in the dirt and allows them to get after it. Having a conversation with Josh Hines Allen, I ain't correct to call him Josh Allen, Josh Hines Allen last weekend, and he was talking about, man, just beefing up and being able to stick his hand in the dirt. When I had a chance to look at him and talk to him, he's like being 280, 285 pounds, a more imposing and a more physical presence on the edge. You take that and you look on the other side with Trayvon Walker, another guy that is a physically imposing big player who is really comfortable putting his hands in the dirt. Trayvon Walker talked at the presser about putting his hands down and going forward and not having to drop this year when he had to drop at times last year, and just being able to do things that are very, very comfortable for him. Man, that is critical. When you talk about two of your blue chip players, two of the guys that you really expect, it is about putting those guys in a situation where they can get after it. And so for Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines Allen, being able to put their hand in the dirt, being able to be in a 3-point stance, to forget and neglect past responsibilities and go after the quarterback, you love that. another nugget that came out in my conversation with Josh Hines Allen. He talked about just being able to rush the pass, and stop the run on the way to the quarterback. Meaning his first and number one objective is he's trying to figure out a way to get to the quarterback and get home. And when you create that kind of mentality, meaning the coaches encourage that kind of mentality, they want you to come off the ball and they want you to go. And everything about this defense is about the team playing fast and reducing the mental clutter and allowing the team to play fast, because they know the job is to see ball, and get there with bad intentions. So when you hear Ryan Nielsen talk about, hey man, we want to run to the ball. I want to see all 11 hats at the ball, is really about simplifying the game to the basics. The basics in terms of playing good defensive ball, it is tackling and running to the ball. It is getting 11 hats to the ball and then making sure that the unit gang tackles to make sure that the ball doesn't leak out or spill. The other part of that is not letting the ball fly over the top of the defense. So when you just think about those three objectives, let's tackle, let's run to the ball, let's keep the ball in front of the defense. Those are easy objectives. And now it's about making sure that you put your players in a position to do it without tricking them, nor really trying to trick the opponent. Okay, so now let's dig further into the scheme and why this scheme really, really works. So as an evaluator or as a team builder, what you're always trying to do is you're trying to make sure that when you draft and you accumulate talent, that you accumulate blue chip players. And then your job as the team builder is to make sure that the players that are acquired, they are in a scheme that really plays to the strengths of each individual player. And you can't necessarily tailor make the scheme for all 53 players that are on the team, but you certainly can tailor make the scheme to fit what the prototypes of what you want on offense and defense are. So when I think about the defense and the way the defense schematically is constructed, I can tell you right now, the four young players that the Jaguars are going to count on for a long time, they're going to be well positioned to dominate in this game. And I'm saying four players, but I really believe there's a fifth player, and I'll talk about him at the very, very end of it. So let's think about building your defense from front to back. Dominant defenses are built from line of scrimmage back to the secondary, meaning that if you can be a dominant defense, you got to be able to dominate in the trenches. And most teams, if you can be a championship caliber team and an elite defense, you have to have a minimum of at least two pass rushers. So let's look at the Jaguars and the young pass rushers that they have and that they've acquired early in the draft. So Josh Hines Allen was a first-round pick, top of the first round. You've seen him be a two-time Pro Bowler. You saw him have 17 and a half sacks last year. He is nothing short of being a dominant player. He can do it in a variety of ways. He can win with force or finesse. And the beauty of it is he's just scratching the surface of what his potential can be. On the other side, you have Travon Walker, number one overall pick a couple years ago. A bit of a controversy over that surrounded that pick because you picked Travon Walker based on his traits as opposed to his production, and Aiden Hutchinson was on the board. But the Jaguars wanted a big physical player. They wanted someone who they believe had the explosiveness to really transition and develop into a pass rusher. And by all accounts, he's been pretty good. Last year, he finished with 10 sacks. When you combine what he did and Josh Hines Allen did, 27 and a half sacks from your two blue chip players. Here's the great thing about the new scheme. So we've heard both guys, Josh Hines Allen and Travon Walker, talk about how the previous scheme asked them to do things that maybe they were uncomfortable doing in terms of dropping in the coverage. They're not doing that anymore. They now are 3-point stance players. They now are coming forward all of the time. That gives them more opportunities to do what they do well, which is beat up opponents at the point of attack and get after the passer. What I like about it is you have complementary players. Let's say Travon Walker is more of the power player. Josh Allen is more of the finesse player. The reason why that works is because different styles. And if they ever evolve to the point where they really can move those guys around and put them in different positions where they can attack what we call the tomato can, the weak player of the offensive line, then the fun really happens for both of those guys. So how does this match up when we talk about the scheme? I talked about being in 3-point stances, but I also talked about the simplicity of what the Jags want to do. You talk about maybe having just a couple of fronts. a few blitzes, a few coverages. That allows you to spend most of your practice time working on technique and fundamentals. And when you eliminate the amount of clutter and the thinking that you have to do, now you get a chance to spend all of your days working on becoming a better player. Not only working on the individual part of you becoming a better player, but the unit becoming better because every day you really dialed into the technique and the details. For a young team, it's almost a collegiate approach, but it's an approach that really has produced really good results. Let's think about Seattle back in the day, the early 2010s, when they were dominating with a bunch of young players getting after it. Pete Carroll believed in a very simple defense, one that didn't require a lot of thought because he wanted his instinctive playmakers to make plays. Do you know who Ryan Nielsen and Chris Richard played for in college? Pete Carroll. So maybe there's some carryover between how those guys learned, how they played, how they continue to be a part of programs, Chris Richard specifically in Seattle, and the success that those units had in a very simple defense that was designed to really upgrade and enhance the young players and their talents. So the two pass rushers are in a system that is really comfortable for them. So you feel great about what they potentially can do in a see ball, get ball defense. Now let's go to the second level. Look, Foye Oluokun is a dominant player. He's been great. He's a tackling machine. Love him. But let's think about team building and long range and what you're thinking about. I was wrong. I expected Devin Lloyd to potentially be a Sam linebacker that would come off the edges and do some of those things. The Jags have decided to make him a Mike linebacker. And in talking to people around the building in terms of like that decision and why it works is the speed of your defense is really determined by the speed, tempo, and intensity of your Mike linebacker. Back in the mid-90s when I played in Jacksonville, Dick Duran was the defensive coordinator. And Dick Duran used to tell me that if you want to build a dominant defense, you got to build it dominant right down the middle. He said, if you look at every sport that is ever played, the championship teams are dominant right down the middle. So when you think about baseball, pitcher, catcher, second, short, center fielder, those are your key players. You control the middle of the field, you control the game. You think about basketball back in the day, the way it was played. It was point guard, center, inside, outside presence. You dominate in the middle, you win the game. Football is no different. Now, it's changed a little bit with the pass rushers, but a dominant defensive tackle, a Mike linebacker, and a free safety, you can win a lot of games because those are the positions of centrality, meaning the thinking people's positions, but also the playmaking positions. You now put Devin Lloyd in a playmaking position where he can see ball, get ball, and have a greater impact. By putting him in the middle of the field, you now enable him to control the game from sideline to sideline, meaning to his right, to his left, he still has the potential to impact the game. In a defense that is simple, where we're talking about see ball, get ball, not a lot of thinking, let your athletes be athletic and instinctive, man, this may unlock him where his game goes from being a really good contributor to maybe he plays at a Pro Bowl level because he's given the freedom to really go after it and do some of the things that he's always been able to do. Because even in his whatever moments that we say he struggled, he still produced a lot of splash plays. And so that splash play production, tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions, those decide games. Maybe that's why they wanted to put him at Mike linebacker, to give him more opportunity to control and dominate the game from inside out. Now, let's go, because we talk about Devin Lloyd. We just saw Tyson Campbell sign a big money deal at corner, one that put him at $19 million, which a lot of people were like shocked because they're like, man, he's not a top 5 corner. Here's what I'll say. Cornerbacks are often system players who have to be in the right system for them to flourish. It's only a handful of guys that you can just throw out there and watch them dominate the game in any system without having to really coach it or rearrange it for them to have success. Tyson Campbell is a guy who has the length, has the athleticism to really be, I would say, an upper echelon elite man-to-man corner. His size is real. His length is real. And he's a diligent worker when it comes to his technique. If you ever watch him at practice, you can just see him really working on the nuances and the finer points of the technique. The Jaguars are now playing more bump and run coverage, or more what they call like shell coverage at the beginning, where the DBs are nose to nose. When I look at Tyson Campbell, because everyone talks about his interceptions or lack thereof, You have to understand when you go back to Georgia and look at how Georgia played, because Georgia played in a quarters defense where they utilized a lot of like shell pre-snap concepts, much like the Jaguars are doing now. Tyson was really good when he was able to bump and run, nose to nose, challenge guys, but his back was always to the quarterback. So he never really registered a lot of interceptions. It was always more breakups to interceptions. Let me explain why that is. When you play man-to-man and your back is to the quarterback, you don't see the ball thrown from the hand of the quarterback. So a lot of times when you get your head around and get your hands on the ball, it's late reactions. And so that is why they're more likely to bat the ball down as opposed to pick it off. If you want a defense that specializes in getting a lot of interceptions, you play zone, because now what you're looking for are interceptions off tips and overthrows, and you see the ball come out of the quarterback's hands. This defense is not that. But the turnovers can happen because when you're nose to nose, what you do is you really shrink what wide receivers can do. You limit the number of releases and routes they can run because you chop down the route tree because you can force them to the sideline. The other part of it is because you're so snug, and if you get really good playing the man, you now begin to have those interceptions and stuff happen because the ball is deflected, because now the windows are tighter because you're in man coverage as opposed to zone. Tyson Campbell can have a breakout year, a Pro Bowl year, and may not register a number of interceptions. He will be judged on completion percentage allowed, passer rating allowed, and eventually PBUs. If he has low numbers in completion percentage and passer rating, but high numbers in breakups, he is playing like the $19 million quarterback that they expect. One note about Tyson Campbell, which is interesting. Tyson Campbell is lining up at right cornerback for the Jaguars. In traditional terms, most teams, when they have an elite corner, they put him on the left side because left corner faces the strong side of a right-handed quarterback. So right-handed quarterbacks throw to the right. The corner on the offensive right is the defensive left, so it's the left corner. Tyson's on the backside of the defense. Some of that might be due to comfortability. Some of that might eventually be due to maybe they move him around and travel him. But right now he's playing at right corner. And it really doesn't matter because people will work both sides of the field. Just interesting to note that he is a right corner, something that he's always done. And what that tells me is, regardless of what the Jaguars paid him, they want him to play in a manner that's very comfortable to him. Because if he's comfortable and he plays at a high level, no one cares if you line up at right or left. Final thing, I said there was 5 players, and I said this player was a bonus player in terms of being key to why this team is building the defense this way. And I'm going to say this. I am all in on Andre Cisco. And I've always been in on Andre Cisco since he came out of Syracuse, watched him play at Syracuse when he had 13 interception. And he was he was a dominant ball hawk. The reason why I believe this defense really works for him, he is going to have more opportunities to set traps for the defense because defensive backs on the perimeter are nose to nose. That means they're going to be tighter windows. That also means that you're going to see more tips and deflections where a roaming playmaker is going to be able to catch a bunch of interceptions off caroms and deflections. So that's one. Secondly, when you're playing maybe the solid play that the Jaguars want to play, where they're playing man coverage, and I would say jamming the middle of the field, meaning when they play cover one, which is man free, meaning they're man-to-man outside, they have a post safety and maybe another player lurking in the middle, they're discouraging quarterbacks from playing over the middle of the field. Well, when you start out in that too high shell, like they're doing, where it always looks like cover 2 or quarters, you're now dropping one of those safeties down in the middle, sometimes right at the sticks where it's the line to gain. Andre Cisco is one of the best in the business at one, reading the quarterback's mail, meaning catching his eyes and understanding where he's going, but also understanding routes. The thing that he's never really been given freedom to do is to set those traps, meaning there are times where a defense coordinator may say, hey, this is one where you can go make a play. They may come at the next play and say, hey, you got to play it traditional. Don't jump routes. Play it straight. Andre Cisco is a high IQ player who has the ability to be able to do it. He and Dewey, because I believe Andrew Wingard is also really good at understanding defense and how the scheme matches the routes and the concept they're facing. I believe Cisco in particular is going to have a field day feasting off these errant throws. And I look for a lot of turnovers from his position, from him specifically. So when you think about, I would say, the Fab Five, right? The fabulous 5 that the Jaguars have on defense. The 2 pass rushers, Trayvon Walker, Josh Hines Allen, defense works for them. Devin Lloyd in the middle. The defense works for him because now it's a see ball, get ball defense where he can play. Tyson Campbell being a bump and run specialist, playing in a defense that is going to be extensively bump and run. It allows him to play to his strengths. And then Cisco being a guy that is a ball hawk in the middle of the field, playing in a defense where he can drop down and attack the ball. Lights out. Look out for the big plays to happen, not only from him, but from the rest of the unit. So we talked about it. The Fab Five playing in the defense that works. I expected this Jaguars defense to be a dominant defense. We'll see how it plays out, but I'm really excited for next week to be able to get down there on Saturday and see what that preseason kickoff looks like. Even though the starters may not play, I think it'll give us some clues to how Ryan Nielsen and his defense wants to play the 2024 season. So that's it. That's the podcast. Make sure you tune in, rate, review, subscribe to Bleav in Jaguars, but also all the great stuff that we have on the Bleav Network. Make sure you tune in to Fubo, YouTube. Check out all the great stuff that the Bleav Network has going on. My colleagues are doing great work. I want to prop them up. But more importantly, I want to continue to build out our community. So make sure the next time you tune in, tell a friend. Make sure a friend brings a friend as we continue to grow, as we get closer to the 2024 regular season. I'm Bucky Brooks. This is Bleav in Jaguars. I'll talk to you next week.